That's what fear is. Your thoughts distort reality. You have to have the courage to stay in the situation that frightens you.
Do you love me? I can't do this. The ground is burning.
The ground is not burning.
Nature is Satan's church.
Do you know what you're saying?
You shouldn't underestimate Eve.
Tell me what you think is supposed to happen in the woods.
Where are you? I shouldn't have come here. Get out!
So Lars von Trier is a provocateur in that, like, he likes to make shit that pisses people off and that amuses him. He gets off on it. And as a person, I mean, I don't know him, I have not met the guy, but I've heard enough bad shit come out of his mouth that I just don't like him. And he kind of reminds me of this sort of the Todd Solondz, Larry Clark school of filmmaker, where every time you make a movie, it's going to push a nerve. It's going to be super shitty about some aspect, or in otherwise either he's pushing a nerve or he's just bathing in the suffrage of women, which by his own admission he finds enjoyable. He enjoys women suffering. That's entertaining. His words. So
how does he get the women that he gets to be in his films?
Well, he's a very respected artiste, and I think he's more of an artiste than he is a filmmaker personally. Okay, I said that I think that there's some amazing visual achievement in a lot of his films, and AntiChrist is no exception. And the full body and soul commitment of Charlotte Gainsbourg and Willem Dafoe deserves a lot of respect. But it's all in the service of a guy who thinks it's a joke on his own audience, by his own words. And I can't respect that. I can't respect that he thinks he's pulling one over on us. I don't think that's a fair reason to dislike the movie, because I don't like the film's creator. So upon watching this for the first time, this wasn't me revisiting it. I, after Dogville, just decided I was done with Lars von Trier. I hadn't liked any fucking thing he'd done since Breaking the Waves, and I had this sinking feeling like after if I watched Breaking the Waves again, that it would just become about the suffering of the character. Instead of me thinking, oh, what a strong performance, she really went there emotionally, all I'll picture is Lars von Trier behind the camera with an erection. Okay, so that's gonna hurt it for me, right? He has done stuff more interesting in his far past when he did TV in Denmark, that Kingdom miniseries and stuff like that, The Haunted Hospital. What an ideal setting for a ghost story, a hospital, you know. There's just seemed full of potential, and there's stuff in his background that's not without interest. But generally speaking, the theme of his work is women suffering and sort of art portrait shots. Like it's film, but he has these almost still canvas portraits that he will measure in on and make you kind of drink it in. There's a few shots of the nature, particularly when we get into Eden in AntiChrist, where it says, look at this for a few seconds.
Nature is Satan's church.
And then we go moving on forward.
That was an important idea.
Exactly. The story has to do with a couple who's lost their baby. Was it an act of just a mistake or an act of neglect? It's hard to say. They're having a fairly passionate love scene. The baby is not being watched. The baby crawls to a window. The baby falls out the window in brutal, agonizing black and white slow motion. And then the woman, we never get any names in this.
They're just
he and she.
They're just the pronouns of he and she.
Which, by the way, is always a flag right away for me.
Is
if
it?
you have a movie where they don't bother to give characters names, if we're just dealing with he and she, flag.
Would you have been mad if it had been Adam and Eve?
Well, at least it would have been more directly on point. But I mean, I guess that would have made even more sense because, like, they've been so on the nose about everything else. Why not just call them Adam and Eve?
Sure.
But Willem Dafoe is going to help his wife through this grief by basically psychologically and physically torturing her. She is then going to avenge that psychological and physical torture by, well, returning the favor, including attaching a legit millstone to him, which I thought was something out of way fucking left field.
Well, after
we have genital mutilation. Yes. We have lots of stale, these crazy images of nature. The deer running around with the stillborn calf half hanging out. And that weird fucking fox thing that sort of speaks.
Yeah,
Chaos reigns. Yes.
Chaos reigns. Yeah.
It's a jumble of awful images, strange perversion, confusion, aggression, and uncomfortableness. And that's the movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's stuff to talk about. You could say, like, well, I mean, that's what the movie is, uncomfortable and beautiful, and it goes on for 2 hours, and that kind of is like what the experience of the movie is.
Yeah.
What you get out of it is what you kind of get out of it, I think. For me, the uncomfortable kind of trumped anything else. Is there an intellectual layer to be explored? Probably, yeah. There's some ideas. Is there some interesting ideas about gender politics? Yes. And I think for me, the most compelling thing that I could lock into and think, like, help me make sense of the movie is the AntiChrist, the perversion of nature, this reversing the idea that nature is good inherently and is there for us and loves us back. This is the idea of nature where none of that is true and closer to
and that women
opposite.
are nature. Because there's this line in there that she says, our bodies are not our own. Our bodies belong to nature. And then this suggestion nature is Satan's playground. And I think a lot of it is about...
is some of the muddiest shit in the movie for me personally.
Like, I can understand how people would see it either as hugely misogynist or the opposite.
Opposite is a feminist film.
Here's
he himself.
Okay, but here we go. Yeah.
Here's a few Lars von Trier's quotes, just from the guy. Some of them having to do with this movie, but some of them just generally. He grew up. He chose Catholicism as his chosen faith, mainly to piss off all the Protestants that lived around him. Okay. He considered AntiChrist a fun way to work through some of the darker aspects of his own personal depression. The movie never fails to make me smile. He's often visibly drunk and stoned on set, and self-admitted, and has been reported by cast members. Bjork said that she would never do another movie again after working with him. Nicole Kidman had to reassess what she was willing to tolerate after working with him. He does have a history of getting a little bit handsy, or if not handsy, very aggressive and angry and not quite physical, but shitty, particularly to his female cast members. And, that's to speak nothing of the whole Hitler speech at the Cannes Film Festival.
Which Kirsten Dunst was so... she didn't know what to do. You watch her reaction in there, and later she bashed him in interviews.
He says a film shouldn't be entertaining. A film should be a rock in your shoe. He also says he's the greatest filmmaker in the world. And I think even if it was true, if you claim yourself the greatest filmmaker in the world, you're a shithead for saying it.
Yeah.
So we were talking about Jeepers Creepers. Should this bleed into the movie? Should it make me like the movie less? Probably not. Does it? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I like it less because I hate the guy who made it. And maybe that's unfair, but I'm going to be honest with you and say that is true. Okay. And that's a not very good starting point to have in a movie, but that's where I was as I sat down to watch AntiChrist.
Yeah.
I respect the actors, I respect some of the visual components, and most of the rest of the stuff I thought I would either dismiss as interesting or I would dismiss as, oh, I'm supposed to be really shocked or angry right now, aren't I, Lars? Fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the war that I have while watching the movie. I don't hate it the way I expected that, frankly, I was going to hate it, but nor does it make me want to change my mind and suddenly go watch Nymphomaniac and The House that Jack Built. Like, I just don't fucking care anymore.
Yeah.
Like, there's enough great filmmakers out there who are telling stories that actually mean to be a story and mean to entertain. So I'll watch those movies. I'm done with this. So I'm sorry I've overtaken. I spent the first 8 minutes of the review just justifying my position.
It's fine.
But there it is. I'm not a huge fan of AntiChrist. Though I respect elements of it, it's just not for me.
Yeah. I had a lot of connections to this movie, especially as it played along. And one thing I guess I felt great power from, or at least a connectivity or a scaffolding to, is finding about the making of this movie. He was all set to go to make this movie a year in advance before he actually shot it. And he suffered from a huge bout of his, bipolarism. And he had to, like, Eva Green was supposed to play, like, the original Charlotte Gainsborough character. And since I come from a family that where mental illness is very much an issue, especially when it comes to depression, and even I have to watch myself, once in a while, I definitely understood the whole feeling how your body betrays you, how nature betrays you. And
the best case scenario is that nature gives you everything and then takes it away.
Yeah. So I could totally identify with Von Trier and his exploration of that, about how we can think nature is a very beautiful thing, but it could also be very much like Satan's church. And having an illness like that and wanting to get better, like, that's something else that clearly I felt kind of struggling through this movie, especially when the Gainsborough character, she has an epiphany, and for a brief moment is happiness, and Willem Dafoe just doesn't trust it.
No.
Having that feeling of this, you so want to get better, but you can't because you're so sad, and not understanding it. I deeply felt like that. I also understand, through his history, I think he's also very aware of his chauvinism. He actually hired a chauvinistic expert for this movie, because that's one thing.
What a weird thing.
Yeah, it was a radical feminist, and wanted to, and he definitely knows how patriarchal the Catholic faith is, how a lot of faith is, and how it's very much a destructive, repulsive thing for women.
I feel like neither person comes out a winner in this. But it's
Well,
the
here's the
age-old trope of men are monsters and women are monster food, and I'm over it. Does Willem Dafoe not mourn his child?
Okay,
he is so.
He
Treats her as a project instead of dealing with his feelings. He now moves into, she's my patient. I'm going to spend full time making her my patient. She's not my wife. She's my patient. He breaks so many ethics codes by doing that.
Great. And if he was a character with a name, then we could get into that. But if he is man,
and of course Von Trier hates the psychiatric field. Like he's come out and said, like, one of the reasons why I wanted to make this movie was just to tar and feather the psychiatric field. Right. Willem Dafoe, I think, is really the true monster in this movie. We get the sense that he's been psychologically torturing her even before the child incident happens. So when she does eventually lash out, I can honestly see a lot of women really cheering for her. Mm-hmm. She also is made to convince through her own religious teachings, that women, she thinks that women are inherently evil. She has that confession to him.
She says that,
about that. And that's just how much of the brainwashing she's just trying to at least process. Mm-hmm. So, like, this movie, Dafoe, at the very least, is doing a lot of, and I hate the term, mansplaining everything to her. Oh. And when his psychological torture has driven her to, and it's such a horrifying scene where she's pouring all the pills down the toilet. Mm-hmm. And she's looking back, sort of smiling. I literally gasped out to, no! What are you doing? They're like, this is no good is coming this, and you're evil for suggesting this.
Yeah.
So I think it is a giant feminist nightmare of a movie, and that's just
and
one
of
of
them. And if I believed that Lars von Trier cared about feminism, I might back you up on that.
Okay.
But I think he's a provocateur, and he wants people to be shocked.
But is he...
Yes, I agree with you. I agree that's one of the angles, and I think one of the huge criticisms that I have for Von Trier is, you need to lighten up a little bit, obviously, but also choose a different avenue. Like if that's all you always what you're doing, that you're meant to be
A
provocative.
movie shouldn't be entertaining. It should be a rock in your shoe.
I think some of that
There's
element.
so
is,
many frivolous movies that come out though.
Yeah.
And so that's the point. I think he's trying to make. He's making it in a very
he's also
self-serving and
trying to be
arrogant
this
way.
grotesque showmanship, like
There is, yeah.
element to it. So whether he truly believes in himself to be the greatest filmmaker in the world.
No, I think that,
Yeah.
I doubt he does, but he
Yeah.
knows that a lot of people will be pissed off that he
Yeah.
says it. And
He says
that's
it,
why he
but,
says it.
and that
Yeah.
gets attention to his movies.
Yeah.
Made
And I just
outside
don't
of
respect that.
outside of a studio system, and
It gets to be a little much after a while, and I freely admit
I think he
that.
sunk Melancholia with what he said at that press conference, because Melancholia, I
Supposedly
know you haven't
really
seen
good,
it.
but-
It's a fantastic film. It's one of Kirsten Dunst's best performances, but then people stayed away from it because
I haven't seen it, but
Of what he
it wasn't
said,
because of the press conference. It was like I said,
Yeah.
after Dogville, I can't even fully articulate how much I hated Dancer in the Dark.
Yeah.
Like I fucking
I like
despised
Dancer in the
it.
Dark,
I
but-
fucking hated it. And like I'm a Bjork fan. It wasn't that I didn't like the music.
I like
didn't connect
Bjork,
with
I like the music
I think that she's
more
actually
than-
an emotional powerhouse, and it's too bad she quit making movies because I bet you she's quite an actress.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that was one of his Women Suffer, and he gets off on it movies, and I really didn't like it. And
Yeah.
Dogville was somehow an even artier, fartier version of that, getting legitimized by serious, real actors, and it just like. I was just like, no. I mean, maybe there's a place for this kind of cinema, but
Yeah.
this is not for me. I am done. Fuck you, Lars von Trier.
Yeah.
I did the same thing with Todd Solondz, and I did the same thing with Larry Clark.
and
Yeah.
talented filmmakers.
Sure, but like,
And I
I
feel the
think
same
they're
way
more
about-
about pissing people off
Yeah.
than they are about.
You do need to grow.
Storytelling,
You,
filmmaking.
I fully admit you.
That's
do need
all
to,
you can do is
Yeah.
piss people off. That's kind of lame and easy.
I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
hear anything about the new film, and
Oh, I heard it's shocking, and there's two
Is it?
versions of it. It's really him talking about himself, or at least how the media perceives him in a lot of ways. I haven't seen it yet. I'm not going to rush to it. Look, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Is that I don't see him as an amazing filmmaker. I do think he needs to
He's
grow.
an artist.
He's an artist.
And, like,
he
he's
can
got
create a great shot. I mean,
bold
the opening
ideas.
sequence of this movie, I mean, I would challenge you to find anything that looks more beautiful while we're watching a child jump out of a window.
Yeah.
I mean, and a very graphic
sex scene.
sex
happening
scene.
while it's going on.
But there's so much important stuff happening in that sequence and I know you will not want to watch it ever again, but watching it again, the first three parts are
Yeah.
in there with those soldiers. Pain. What is it? Pain.
the three
grief,
beggars who we
and-
actually see at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we return to something that isn't shown later on, just before the genital mutilation. And I think there's this idea in here that, or suggestion that, two ideas I have, and you can maybe throw in you're reading things into this movie. One of them is the idea that the little boy sees his parents having sex, and he chooses to jump out the window because he doesn't know what's happening. He can't reconcile that. That's maybe me stretching it. The other one is that she saw that he was getting up there and was in a dangerous situation, but she was so committed to having her orgasm that
Which
she
is when she
and then
revisits
so
it, she implies that.
and then
is that her
and then
perception
and then
or is
she
that the reality?
and then right after
Yeah.
that she cuts off her clitoris.
Yeah.
So because she's ripping out the thing that basically killed her child, and all of the guilt that she has, blaming herself for the death of her.
But again,
Her son.
My intro
to
to
this great malaise.
psychoanalysis, by that, she is so furious with all the physical and psychological torment that her husband has subjected her to.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, when she finally embraces what she believes to be her responsibility, she sexually mutilates herself. Does that not somehow vindicate his position? And here's the other thing, the faceless crowd of women that pass by the evil man. Yes, man is evil and bad, as he is in every movie, especially in these art movies. They're in period clothing and their faces are all soft, so Does that mean he can't understand women? Is that falling back to the plight of women? And again, if I believed that Lars von Trier gave a shit about women, I could make a meal out of that. But it's completely counterfeit, right? Like, he doesn't believe that. Or if he does, he's closer in his heart to being on side with the Willem Dafoe character. And I'm just basing this on, again, the movies I've seen of his and words that have come out of the man's mouth.
But is he saying that so that people will see the movie and then they'll be like totally screwed? Like, he doesn't believe any of the stuff he's saying because he's trying to get this attention, and then you see it and you're like,
mix those ideas out.
Seems
there.
like there's a feminist message in here, but he says stuff which is so. Where do we actually sit?
It's the provocation. It's all about him.
Yeah.
After a point, like, the films are just the next film. As long as it's pissing people off, he's winning.
I mean, I took it that it was the faceless victims.
I agree that he needs to find a different tune.
Yeah.
I agree. But if you're going to be dealing with dark, horrific subjects like he is in AntiChrist, I'm glad he was let off the reins.
He didn't pull punches. This is not as
nothing
is safe about this movie.
I've seen in any horror movie.
Yeah, I do think that this movie could not be made else by a person who is suffering from mental illness, such as bipolarism. This seems like the perfect movie that could come out of that kind of mind.
Right.
And I'm willing to at least sort of examine it, and whether he's full of baloney, great, fine. And I agree that he does need to find a different story.
And at this point, the whole role of the males as the abuser, like, undimensioned evil piece of shit who has nothing to contribute but hate and wrong in the world, has been well enough explored. I would like to see some dimension, or it's an exploration of why, to go back to our old Chicago 10 argument.
Sure.
Okay, they're evil. Why are they evil? Why is he doing this? Maybe doesn't attempt to answer that. Just for the record, we're going to run out of time in 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
Is Willem Dafoe's character truly evil, or is he avoiding feeling the grief of losing his son? That's
he's
the question I
treated
have.
as
Column A and column B combined, to be perfectly honest.
He jumps into his work like a lot of people do when men, I'm generalizing here.
Makes it about her.
Yeah.
And externalizes it. Women internalize, men externalize. Is it that simple?
Yeah.
Again, and just the broad strokes. The place that they go to get well is Eden, but it's so not.
Eden is no longer Eden anymore. The sin has happened.
Not
the world
subtle,
and nature
but
is
visually well represented.
Satan is in charge.
Yep.
I'm sorry, it feels like an abrupt way to stop. Is there anything else we want to say about AntiChrist?
It has a huge impact on me, but it is not for everyone.
Yeah. I'm sorry to be the counterpoint on this.
No, it's good.
And again, much like I said with Jeepers Creepers, I don't know that my review of this is fair, but I would feel dishonest if I said anything, but there it is.